we'll get started. So, hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. First of all, if there's some background noises. So if you're not engaged in the conversation, you want to mute your microphones just so other people can make sure to be heard. Otherwise, I will mute you just like that. First of all, if you don't know me, my name is Tony Torrico. I'm the artistic director of Fancy Hobo Improv. We perform all around Orange County. First, I think I want to thank all of the leaders of improv organizations in Orange County that could be here today. We'll get to official introductions in a second, and I also want to thank. I know that there are a couple of players on here as well, people who wanted to join us for this conversation. So thank you for that. And let's get started. I think right now, what we're seeing is like a really powerful movement in this country and around the world, and institutions, whether they're governmental institutions, educational institutions, and even improv institutions you're seeing, are engaging in a critical moment in history to bring about real systemic change. And that's it. That's one of the reasons we're here today, is to engage in this dialogue. I think, from my own personal opinion, is no matter how large or how small the community is, it's still crucial to engage in these types of dialogues, and to take actions in the fight against racism, prejudice, system of oppressions. And through these dialogues, we begin to change the environment. I think something we'll bring up a lot is that, people are really a product of their environment and what the culture finds acceptable and what the culture allows. So we can begin to make, sociological changes, no matter how large or how small the community that is engaging in. So today, I want to make sure to mention a couple of things. I want us to ask us to all make sure that we're engaging in this dialogue and this conversation in a respectful way, with a lot of care, with great compassion, and to listen deeply, to reflect, to think critically on what we've heard here today. And also, we want to make sure that that we don't speak out for other cultures, other people. I think it's important to speak from our own perspectives and to build a dialogue from those perspectives. And I know that this event is about raising diverse voices. So the purpose of the meeting is to hear from BIPOC and other marginalized voices and find solutions and actions that we can take. And that means if you're not a part of a marginalized identity group, even if you're in the meeting, you may be mostly listening and reflecting on what you hear, and that is perfectly acceptable. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We'll engage in a dialogue about it. We'll talk about, I think, the main topic is how do we raise BIPOC voices in our community. But that also kind of dumbs down to a bunch of other little things. How do we cultivate safe spaces for BIPOC to create and to lead within this community? How to fight against racism, prejudices, and systems of oppression that may manifest within our own individual communities and the community at large? And what are actions that our individual organization and the community as a whole can take to ensure welcoming, thriving environments for everyone? We also want to I think we want to hear from people, hear testimonials from BIPOC voices and other marginalized voices within our communities to raise concerns about previous experiences. And at the very end of the meeting, I would like to maybe hear from organizations, just so that it's on record that we have some place to reach out if there are places, if there is a need to raise an important issue within your organization. I think making sure that that's accessible to everyone is a good thing, to hold each other accountable. Like I said, the meeting is being recorded for anyone who wasn't able to make it to today's discussion. It'll be sent to every improv organization in Orange County, the leaders that I've come in contact with, to be made available to their own individual communities. So let's do some intros, and then I think we'll dive right into the conversation. You already know me, so let's do the order that I heard back from everybody. So let's start with Matt.
Hello. I think I know a lot of you. I'm Matt. I used to run Spectacles Improv Engine until we shut down in January of this year. So yeah, we've been involved in the community though for like 14 years, I think, before we shut down. So yeah, I'm still, well, I was before pandemic, but was still doing classes, but that's pretty much it. And I'm not sure what else to throw out there, but yeah, that's kind of the state I'm at right now.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here, Matt.
Yeah,
let's go to Rob.
Hi, I'm Robert, and I run the Improv Collective. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Let's go to Devin.
Hey everybody, my name's Devin. I'm a co-owner and co-artistic director of Improv City. We perform over in Irvine. So yeah, we've been around for like 11 years. I know a lot of you guys on here. Good to see you guys. That's about it. Hey.
Okay, let's go to James.
Hey everybody, this is James Stebick. I'm the improv director at the Amazing Comedy Theater, newer improv venue for Orange County. We were just starting to get kind of classes and house teams going before the pandemic shut everything down. So we're still kind of at a starting stage, and I want to make sure to build fair practices, and I want to build a good foundation for the theater for representing all voices. So looking forward to taking notes and learning a lot from this meeting.
Great, awesome. Rod.
Hey guys, I'm Rod. I run Best Coast Improv, which is we're just shy of 3 years old, so we're still quite young. We're just a small team of about 17 people in Santa Ana.
All right. Lauren.
I'm Lauren Baumbauer. I'm a founding member of Modjeska Unscripted Theater and a director, co-director of a lot of the shows there and teacher of some of the classes we've had. We don't have much of an improv community yet. We have shows we hold auditions for the most part. But if Modjeska Playhouse survives, which is what we're part of, we would like to expand that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say and pulling from that and raising voices. Thank you.
Cool. So that's the leadership from various Orange County improv companies. We're going to go to a couple of community members within the Orange County improv scene. Let's start with Fernando.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Fernando. I've been part of the scene, like at least over 10 years now. I've known Tony that long, I've known Rob that long. Some of you I've known the past few years. Thanks, Tony, for organizing this. I'm just here to help out any way I can, to support and listen and share. Thank you for having me.
Great, awesome. Thanks, Fernando. Mikey.
Hi, my name is Mikey Robledo. I am a former leader of Spectacles Improv, ran a few shows over there, and I'm also been a part of the community for about 8 years. Here and there, I've been away from the OC Improv scene for about a couple of years due to work and whatnot, but I'm happy to be here to lend a voice, to listen to everybody, to learn, and to give my experiences as well. Thank you.
Dani.
Hi, I am Dani. I was really involved with Spectacles Improv while it was around, and I've been involved with Improv Collective, and I've been in the OC comedy scene for like 5 or 6 years, I think. So I just played a little bit everywhere, and I'm happy to be here, happy to listen, happy to lend my experiences, and thank you, Tony, for organizing this.
Thank you. Nasaka.
Hello, my name is Nasaka Malimba. I'm on Fancy Hobo. I believe I've been with the team for about 2 years. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. Really happy to be a part of it. So, thank you, Tony, for organizing it.
Thank you. And Holly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Holly. I'm your friendly neighborhood trans girl, member of Fancy Hobo. I've been in the Orange County improv scene since 2005. I'm different groups and teams, but Fancy Hobo is my current team now. And yeah, I'm happy to hear all the voices, and if I can add anything, I'd be happy to add, but I'm here to listen and learn.
Great. Awesome. And then I know we have a couple of other players joining us. I think there's one that's extra joining in right now. A couple of other players from my team. Thank you all for being here. If you have any questions or comments or anything, you can either put them in the chat box or you can raise your hand. I think is a good way to do it. There's a raise hand function so that it makes it a little bit more visible for me if you've got a question or comment or something like that. Okay, so we're having this meeting to talk about how to raise BIPOC voices in our community, and it's it's a simple question to ask, but it's an impossible question to answer. Like, how do we do it? And for me, I think it's going to mean different things to all of us. For me, that means a couple of key points. It means accessibility. It means representation. It means protection. It means empowerment, and it means action. And I think all of those things work together. You cannot have representation without accessibility. You can't have accessibility really without protection. When I talk about empowerment, I talk about leadership, things like that. And all of these things can't be done without action. So I want to kind of open it up first to any of the BIPOC people in the group here. When you think of how do we raise BIPOC voices within the community, whether it be a specific whether it's an individual organization or community as a whole, where do you think that kind of starts from? Who wants to go? You can just pop in here too. Oh,
I'll jump in here.
Great.
So in quarantining, I've been binging a lot of vintage Tony Award shows. And something that I've noticed is that the comedy theater community at large for a while has been aware of issues of representation and has made attempts to address it. So I think it would be really good if we try to focus on the root causes of the need for this, which, quite frankly, from my perspective, has a lot to do with the history of our country and marginalized groups and the competition for resources when they became a part of quote unquote America, and how art was used to justify the dominant political agendas. And so, it's like coming from that perspective, it's possibly understandable why an artist like Tina Fey feels that or felt before last week, rather, that it's okay to do blackface or brownface, provided you're making fun of the fact that you're aware that it's inappropriate. It's like, where is the history that leads to the disconnect in what is and hasn't been acceptable? You know, because like a lot of people in the broader theater comedy community are having to rethink their entire sticks now, you know? So, and it's like, it's because they thought that they were all right before, right? Because like the different things that had done for inclusion, you know? So if we could keep an eye towards like actual progress as opposed to just signaling progress.
I absolutely agree with that sentiment. I think like you have to kind of examine the culture and the sociology of the comedy scene and how it was created and like where it comes from in order to really kind of like extrapolate where something, I don't know, it's so hard. I'm trying to find words to put this in, but I think like I think you bring up a good point when you talk about how the art form was used to, you know, propagate prejudice and things like that, and subjugate different groups for it, and really like what became acceptable to do that was comedy, the subjugation of people, the stereotypes of people, and how like that narrative has like negatively had an impact on where comedy and performance, or and even, you know, theater, because we're a part of the theater industry as well, like how that's led to the current manifestations of things that we have to change and alter. Yeah, there's so much to bring up on this point, whether it's, you know, like we can see manifestations of it within like current narratives people put on stage, current stereotypes people put on stage, and how like being raised in this certain culture that sort of propped up systems of oppression and has made like art for it ends up having negative effects now. So let's talk about that. Let's examine the historical significance of like comedy. Where do we think, you know, this all kind of comes from? What is the root issue here that we've just sort of, that comedy in general has allowed to fester and to change into the current situation that we have?
I think that part of the problem is when you're not part of a marginalized group and you watch this comedy that is regularly offensive and oppressive to so many different groups. At least from my perspective, it seems like people don't question it, and because it doesn't negatively affect them, and then they continue to propagate it and to add to it, and it builds and you know, very traditionally comedy is a white straight boys club, and those people are not negatively impacted by that comedy, so they don't feel the need to question it. And when people do question it, there's an element of white fragility that comes up a lot, or there's a defensiveness, or there's the whole, it's just a joke, it's just comedy, don't get so sensitive, aren't you a comedian, don't you have a sense of humor? So I think it's that there hasn't been enough people from marginalized communities to speak up and to really fight for the fact that it's not humor, it is a pillar of oppression for people who want to be in the comedy community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that in order to, because there's been like a system of power in place of this, like, you know, white male driven power over industry and the entertainment industry in general, not just comedy, not just theater, but movies, film, TV, what we kind of consume constantly, that puts this one specific narrative, and everything else is just sort of, you know, like, you know, a stereotype or a joke or a little thing like this. And it's not given any, like, really the proper representation, not only in like the performances of those, of like entertainment in general, but I think it also has to do with, like you touched on, like, who, you know, the powers that control this, the entertainment, who is like running this, who has the power to change things, and what don't they, what do they do and what don't they do, and what do they think is totally fine and acceptable, and what sort of message they put forward. I think we've got a lot of great comments in here, and I don't want to, like, we're like moving around in a bunch of different topics. This is a big topic to discuss. But yeah, Tony, I think you're like what the point you make up. Yeah, that so many people hide behind that. Oh, it's just a joke. Calm down, relax. Excuse of comedy. It's always been allowed. That's always been allowed to. We've always been allowed to make jokes at culture's expense and things like that. And yeah, like exactly what you said. They don't realize that these jokes are shaping society's perceptions of different marginalized and diverse groups. So yeah, other like root causes. I think we've touched on a lot of them, but I think there's, you know, a lot there in this subject to unearth. Does anyone want to kind of elaborate? Yeah, Tony, go for it.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, a lot of us got into improv, because I got into improv because I was just such a big fan of some of those sketch comedy shows that we see on TV, like SNL, Key and Peele. So I know Key and Peele is explicitly done to be from a biracial perspective, but I was wondering, because I've been thinking a little bit lately about how the mainstream media influences our choices that we make, the things that we write, the characters we portray. Because I feel that as an improviser, I tend to import a lot of the things that I observe in my everyday life and the media that I consume. And I just bring it to the stage with me. I feel like it's just the mainstream media is very white American. I do admit that when I endow people with names, they tend to be very standard Western names, just because I feel like it's not going to offend anyone. It's not going to, it's just safe. So I guess I'm just saying, this is a very long-winded way of saying that I just feel like mainstream media is from a very white American perspective, and I feel like that's calibrated me to thinking from that default setting. Like I don't even consume that much Asian American media, so people might look to me expecting to have a definitive Asian American perspective, but no, my perspective is just me. Sure, I'm around a lot of the things too, but my perspective is my own. I guess to answer Tony's question about root causes, I'm just thinking it's the stuff we consume in our everyday lives. That's just a thought.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Tony, I'm so sorry I didn't introduce you. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Tony Phonethibsavads. I am a performer at the Amazing Comedy Theater. I am only been involved in Orange County Improv for 1 year, but I've been highly involved in Indianapolis for 3 years, and at Indiana University, where I did my PhD. I was there. I performed as part of their student groups for 5 years. So 9 years overall, just 1 year here in Orange County. And 8 of those 9 years were in Indiana. So it was a very white experience for me.
Yeah. It's funny because like I recently thought a lot about like what are certain expectations when even I hear, like, to focus back in on improv, what are expectations when I hear improv, and when I or you know like what are the connotations when I hear improv? And there has been kind of this this running kind of narrative that improv and entertainment really is a white man's game, and it's that's just the way it's always been, and that's what will always be. And I think we can begin to have through dialogues like that, and even like challenging those kind of connotations and ideas behind what's like already kind of attached, at least for me, begins to kind of like we can begin to like kind of like shatter that image and start on ways to create like actions and to change that. I know, speaking from my own point of view, like and when we touch on this topic of raising BIPOC voices in our community, for me, the first two kind of things that I mentioned, the first two kind of key things that I mentioned were accessibility and protection. And I think that's really about making it like available for people of diverse backgrounds and groups and marginalized groups to have access, and not only to have access, but to feel comfortable and to know that that place is safe, away from any sort of persecution, racism, xenophobia, judgment. And that's something that I also kind of want to look at and examine, really, is like, how do we create accessibility? How do we create safe spaces? Fernando, I really enjoyed this conversation you had earlier with David Escobedo about like the Latinx experience in improv, and as somebody from the Latinx community, I'd be interested to see like what your perspectives are on like cultivating like maybe safety and accessibility. What does that mean to you?
Sure. Well, I've been listening to everything, and I haven't spoken up because I want to respect everyone's things. And like root causes, when I think root causes, I think it's just feeling welcome. That's probably the biggest barrier of entry to anybody. That is just from day one. I can tell you that, like from my first class at Orange County, Orange Coast College, and just feeling welcome is probably the biggest thing. And then I don't know, at least from the Latino experience, like maybe you've never dealt with a white person before. Maybe college is your first time you deal with a white person, and you don't know how to navigate those cultural dynamics. Like I remember I was on a team. I won't say their name, but they weren't a bad team, but they're not around anymore. We would rehearse like midnight on Saturdays in Costa Mesa, and sometimes it was earlier, and I would go, and it'd be a bunch of white people in a living room. The parents would walk into the house, and I would lose my shit because I was like, fuck, am I supposed to say hi to them? Because in Latino households, you are taught to say hi to every parent, like as if they're your parents. Like it's a big deal. Like if I went to your house and then say hi to your dad, and I met your dad actually, and I've actually said hi to him, and he's a very nice guy. But in a Latin house, if you say hi to someone, it's big disrespect. But at this house, this guy came in, and I was like, do I say hi to him? What do I do? It was very confusing. And I feel sometimes if you're like a person of color, you have to navigate these white spaces, and you have to kind of just learn by failing of how to interact with them. Okay, I can't behave that way. I don't do this. I don't do that. Okay. And the thing is, it's never the other way around. It's never them being like, how am I going to treat you? How am I going to make him more comfortable? It's always about you adapting yourself to that space. So some people are able to do that work and be like, all right, fuck it. I'm going to learn how to adapt now because I have ambition or I want to succeed or whatever. So you do that and you have to code switch, and it's like a constant code switch. And you're just like, all right, now I have to, I don't want to say act white, but like I have to adapt to this majority white space. So a lot of people, they see that and they're like, you know what, I'm out. I'm not going to do this because I don't feel welcome. There's not enough people who look like me for someone to show me. And a lot of people throughout the years have like come to me for help and like they want to break in or whatever. But I think they see the work it takes to break into a majority white space and just like, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to go do this somewhere else. So I think it's just feeling welcome in those spaces. And how do you make someone feel welcome? I don't know. That's tough. I think sometimes it's just if they see people who look like themselves, that'll make them feel welcome. If the teachers themselves are just nice human beings, because sometimes I think you have like liberal white people who are like, they're more concerned about being perceived as liberal than being a human being who's empathetic and kind. So they're more like, oh man, you're Latino, huh? I feel your pain. That's happened to me a few times. It's pretty funny when you think about it. But like, just feel welcome. You know what? Sometimes it doesn't have to be an overt effort. Like the Improv Collective where Rob is, you know, that's a majority POC theater. And maybe Rob can correct me. I don't think that was the intention. It's just I think POC unconsciously saw themselves on that stage, and they're like, well, we're gonna go here. We're gonna gravitate towards here. But I don't think nothing does like a manifesto somewhere that says this is a POC theater that's going to be all this and that. Maybe there is, but I don't think there is. But I think if you see people who look like you want to go there, because if not, you really have to be really ambitious to want to thrive and grow in a space. And maybe that's where tokenism comes in, where you feel like a token. We're like, fuck, I better be the best, and I can't let anyone else compete with me. And it is the real pressure that happens. So I feel like just making spaces more welcoming just means having more people who look like the communities you're in or the people that you want in there. And yeah, and white people should not pay lip service to diversity if they're not going to make real efforts to put it in there. That's just my opinion.
Hell yeah. I think like so much of what you just said really resonates with me. For as someone who's like been involved in so much theater and improv in Orange County, like the moments where I felt the most comfortable is when I have people around me that look like me and that like really like, you know, and for me that talks about like, you know, representation. If I'm a part of a show or something like that, and there is even somebody who is directing that or something that looks like me, I already immediately kind of feel a sense of comfortability there. Other than like, you know, because I've been in those experiences there, you know, kind of what you're talking about, Fernando, where you're like, you have to navigate the white space. Theater in general is a very white space there. And like, it's directed by white people, and like there's tons of power influence over it. And it's a like, you always have, there's an artifice that you put up to kind of, and a thick skin you got to put up to a bunch of different problematic issues that you've got to be able to deal with just in order to succeed, in order to get your chance to succeed, not even just to succeed, but to get your opportunity to do that. And it's always been, you know, something that's so difficult to overcome. And some people, yeah, they can overcome that and really find a lot of success, but I don't think people should have to overcome that. I think they, you know, having me like representation and accessibility and protection, that means cultivating an environment where there is a diverse group where I can feel comfortable going in. I want to go to Rob because I think Fernando gave you as a really great example of like sort of this culture that's happened by you know, a very diverse group that's come together because not necessarily trying to make it a diverse group, but it just sort of happening that way. I don't know if that was your goal or
sure. I can talk about it a little bit because I thought about this honestly. So like we've been around for like 8-ish years, or something like that. I don't know. But like I thought about this recently because for sure there was no intent like that. It goes back to the guy who started the collective with me, a guy named Jeffrey Ambus, who a couple of you guys might know. It like a couple of years ago, I was like looking around, and I was like looking at the collective, and I was like, because somebody said something about like LA or something about the situations they were in and they didn't like it. I was like looking around, and I was like, oh man, we don't have those like issues. Just like when Tony called me about this thing, I was like, honestly, I don't know if I have. I want to know if like there's anything I can change or learn or how whatever's going on. But like I just haven't. It hasn't been in front of my eyes because I've been performing outside of like when I travel, just in front of the collective for so many years. But Jeffrey, I remember when we like first started, and it was kind of more focused when the way he said it at the beginning was more like about more protecting women. But what he was basically talking about is like, dude, we gotta like protect people. We need to be like just cool with like every person, and anyone who's weird, just shut it down. It was like a basic conversation he brought up to me like that, and it became like like how we led everything was like, if anyone acts kind of shitty or, you know, does stuff that you blatantly shouldn't do in improv, I think for the most of us, we kind of all know now how to act in improv. But, and he was like, just shut it down. I think, yeah, and that's kind of been what happened. Like anyone, so just when someone shows up to a jam, include them. When somebody signs up for a class, include them. If you're in going back to like how Fernando says, you like have to feel comfortable. That means like, if somebody's terrible at improv or just like doesn't work out well, that means you get to play with them and make them look good. And so that people are comfortable. And that was kind of the concept we ran with. And I think I can't like, it's hard for me to like say this, but that's kind of what it was. Like the new person you always play with. I play with the new person typically. There's a new person at the jam where I set them up if I'm hosting the workshop or the jam, I set them up with an awesome champ person who's going to play with them and make them look good and stuff like that from an improv perspective. So that's, I think what happened with us was just include them. And then like, if someone treats people weird, just shut it down. Like that's what happened with us. I don't like, obviously led by a brown dude and an Asian dude, you know, might've affected it. But yeah. And I think like out of the original 20 improv collective members, like 8 of them plus were brown dudes. So that, I think we just kind of started with like a big number of like diversity, and definitely not the intent. The intent was we didn't have anywhere to play improv. And so we opened up a place to play. So
I think you touched on like, and like a really like an accessibility issue is that like, even if someone is, I feel like sometimes there's a lot of like gatekeeping in improv to be like, oh man, we have got to take on the absolute best people that show up, and those are the people we're going to put on. And those people who that ends up happening to end up being people who have been able to have experiences to thrive in anyway. Holly, I see your hand. We'll get you in with one quick second. But like, and I think like, you know, what accessibility are we making to the people who might not have had the privileges of being allowed, you know, stage time somewhere else, or, you know, being allowed the financial capabilities to have training somewhere else? Are we making more things, like how can we make things more accessible to the people who have limited resources, who end up being predominantly people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color? So I think a lot about that too. Holly, I saw a hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that visibility is so important as well as protection. Visibility is probably the key thing, because there's a fear that comes along with being a performer. And one of the things we're taught always in improv is forget your fear, right? And then just step out there and do it. But when you're not, like when you're a straight white guy, there's no that level of fear of like, is the audience gonna like me because I'm who I am? Most straight white guys don't have that. They just kind of go, and they don't have that layer. Whereas like people of color definitely have that layer. Trans people definitely have that layer of like, am I just walking on stage fighting an uphill battle? And so a lot of people, like Fernando said, are just not going to do it. They're like, I don't want to have this battle. And that leads to, like you were saying, a lot of people that are cis white male being out there for a long time and having the practice, and that practice is sharpening their sword and making them look like cleaner, polished performers, because they have no level of fear of like, I don't think this audience is going to like me because I'm white. That doesn't exist. You know, I don't think this audience is like me because I'm cis. You know, so finding a way to erase that fear and just getting more and more reps for people of color, BIPOCs, more reps for LGBTQ people just out there will make everybody on that level in terms of quality. So that way you can pick from truly the best instead of having to worry about like, well, is that guy, you know, you don't have to do that. You can just avoid that. And then protection, it really just comes down from leadership from day one. I remember we, in our auditions, our most recent round of auditions, and this was before I had come out, so nobody knew I was trans at that point. But there was some performers that were in the audition process, and they were doing okay, but they felt that the need to drop language that was highly offensive, and it got me, because here I am sitting there knowing that I'm a trans person. I'm like, I'm afraid to even just exist in this space, right? I don't know any other trans performers at all in improv. And this person who is potentially a person that's going to be joining our team possibly is just dropping like F-bombs. And it's like, you can't, but you didn't let that happen, Tony, which is why I like Fancy Hobo quite a lot, is that you immediately said, that's not going to fly here. That doesn't work, you know? So I think the answer to that question of like, how do we protect people of color? How do we protect LGBTQ people from the top and from the people on the team? You just say, if someone steps out of line, you have to have the courage to go, that's not cool, and you need to stop. And even if it's in front of everybody, even if you're not like taking a second to pull them aside, the more people will know that it's not a cool action, the more people will kind of conform to what is good and what is cool, and helping people up that need to be brought up. So protection and visibility are two of the most important things, I feel.
Yeah, when I think about protection, I also think about you know, protection as in like cultivating a safe space, not within just the culture of the organization itself, but the community that it invites to watch those performances. You know, there needs to be a hard line. Like for me, in my opinion, I try to take a hard line stance, and we've tried to make even more of an effort to do it in the future, but of protecting, of knowing that we're going to uphold ourselves to a certain standard, but we're also going to uphold the audience to a certain standard, because, you know, it is like I think for me, I've been in situations when I've performed improv and there's a nasty slur or racial slur or something disgusting said by the audience. And it's just been sort of like, haha, all right, let's move on to something else. And there's never really been like, you know, like that's an example of where like I didn't feel, you know, protected, because I was like, oh man, we're just going to say that. We're going to let it, you know, let us get away with saying something like that. So I think like protection is huge for me. Oh gosh, there's so much going on. James had a question. Is like, what can theater leaders and directors do to get the message out that their respective theaters are inclusive and safe for performers? Something that I have, oh yeah, and Rod, I see your hand, so I'll head right over to you. But like something that like I have heard, even being involved in a lot of these, I listened into the Second City town hall that happened recently, that's been or one of them, and there were cries for performers for protection in spaces, of saying, you know, not only having policy, but taking action when that policy is broken. You know, it's one thing, I think, to hang a banner in your space that says hate has no place here, but if you let it get, you know, if it does, you know, it's just a sign, and you need to be able to take that action when it happens. So I think just being open, and for me, like being open and very blatant with my organization and with the audience too, to be like, this is the way, you know, it's a code of conduct. We are leaders and performers in a group of organizations whose main purpose is to make joy happen, to make joy and entertainment, and for people to feel good. And any time that again, from my perspective, anytime that anything impedes on that joy, then we're not cultivating a place enough for it. Rod, let's go to you.
Yeah. So I'm speaking a little hypocritically as a theater that has failed at representation a little bit, and I can make the excuse that we're new, but it is an excuse because Robert and I are the only two people on Best Coast who just aren't straight up white. And it's weird being a leader who's not white, although a lot of people think I'm white, and then having a bunch of white people. And that was something that was brought to my attention last year, thankfully, right after we had our last round of auditions, which is like, we're having auditions, but we're not having opportunities to incentivize people in a real way. And, I said the fatal excuse, I'm calling myself out. I said, like, well, I'm getting mostly white people showing up. And this discussion was had with, actually, even though we're a tiny group, we're like 16, 17 people. I made sure on the first day, I was like, you guys are going to vote somebody in to be HR, which is Rachel Cooper, who I think a lot of you know. And so every time, if I do something stupid or if something happens that people don't feel comfortable telling me, she's there to be a really good check system, which has worked out really well, because as much as I can say I'm inclusive and I want to be there for people, at the end of the day, I have, in that specific space, I have power and authority over the people who I'm running these practices and I'm running these shows with. And so having somebody who is strictly their peer and have it be Rachel's job to be like, hey, this happens, and I would be like, oh my God, I wasn't aware of that. That's a really helpful thing for protection. But there was a discussion about where it's like, how do we get people to show up who aren't just white dudes, straight cisgender white dudes? And she and I came up with these really great ideas, and she had some really good suggestions, and we were going to do them all. And of course, this pandemic happened, and so now our theater's closed for 2020 for sure, which sucks. But to answer that, just saying, and I found too, is I'm Iranian, and I found too, people say like, oh, we're looking for diversity, and that to a person of color never reads as genuine, because we hear that so much as lip service that it just doesn't feel true. And so we have to see it in action. And so if you're stuck at a point where it's like, I have a white represented thing and I'm trying to change it, so I'm going to say I change it, but people then look at what it actually is and see that it's not really diverse yet, you have this self-perpetuating cycle, people not coming. And so one of the great ideas we had was, we were hoping to start classes this fall, which again won't happen, will hopefully happen in 2021. And one of the first things we're going to do is have scholarships, diversity scholarships, because people in Orange County especially, it's these rich white dominated neighborhoods, and that's a perpetuating de facto segregation thing that happened because of old laws and the KKK being huge in Orange County. I say in the past, but who knows at this point. And so having diversity scholarships, having specific things where we are asking only for people of color and people who are not cisgender and people who are not straight cisgender hetero white males, and that's the only thing that we're looking for a thing like a scholarship or for a show, I think is a really good course correction. And in that, there's always and sorry for rambling on so much, but this is a big discussion I've been having a lot. In that, there's always the concern from people who are well-meaning and generally white, which is like, well, doesn't that feel like we're being tokenistic to like specifically look for people of color? And so if that is your concern, because that's the discussion I've had lately with a theater I'm a part of, the Wayward Artist, where people have said that. And what I say to that is, if you are driving a car and you veer off the road, that's on accident and you're now in the wrong lane. You have to be intentional to get back to the right lane. So turning left, bearing left isn't that just driving bad again? No, you're getting back into the lane. So I think part of it isn't just saying, oh, we're open to diversity. It's being really intentional about bringing in diverse voices in leadership positions, in places where they have their own place to stay, like getting them to actually be equitable. So it's not just bring them to the table. It's like they should be owners of the table with us.
I completely agree. And it's like something, it's funny because there is like I've come across the sentiment too, as like not just an improviser, but like a theater maker. And Rob, I'll get to you a theater hand. We'll go to you next. But I think like as someone who, when I say things like, oh, why don't we have like a diversity casting call? I would love to do it. And people be like, well, do you think that is appropriate. And I'm like, I am a person of color and I want to perform and have more people of color within my organization. Like, yeah, I think that's appropriate. So I think like having even like that perspective on a leadership team is absolutely important. That like it's you know, your metaphor of like intentionally getting back on the road is a super powerful one that I really enjoy. Rob, you wanted to bring up something.
Yeah. First thing, for me, just like Rod is like the guy I would go to if I had a real question or had concerns, because he's such a real and loyal to this idea that he's talking about, that when anything comes up, he's the kind of guy that I would veer towards, because he's real passionate and just a real good guy about it. So I love that plan. But yeah, for me, he's the one. So I don't want to like tell him like, if you have a problem, call Rod. But that's just the type. Having somebody to go to is so massive. At the Improv Collective, every time there's an issue, I have to go to somebody. I almost never make a decision immediately. Almost never do something without like talking to the crew or talking to everybody or a bunch of people. So I think first off, having somebody to talk to is great too. Having somebody, making decisions by yourself can be real tough. And a lot of times when you make decisions by yourself, you can, fuck up. But the one thing I want to talk about on the same topic, because Rod was talking about what to do in the future as well. One thing that's massive, that's also longstanding, is like your reputation as a theater. It's impossible to go to a theater as, say you're a newer improviser, right? Like newish, like you're kind of new to the scene. If you have like some shitty people or some shitty events happening in your theater, that's one of the first things people talk about when you're like, I want to go audition for blank or over at blank. You're not going to get diversity because there's the shittiest things to talk about are how people are treated badly. And when you're a person treated badly, i.e. like a person of color or a lady, a lot of the times, it's hard. Like if they treat somebody badly in this situation, there's a good chance they treat this person badly because of this, like, because whatever. So the biggest thing for me on what I think, and one thing I've always been a huge focus of, is your reputation of how you handle situations and treat people long term. Like not just like because like what Rod's talking about is massive about like what actual decisions they can control about, we want to do this and we can take steps towards that. But it's when you're being reactive towards something that's actually happening and solving them. Because your reputation, if you want to be a theater that has different types of people in it, you gotta have a good reputation or no one's gonna want to be there. I'm talking about the people that are new to the scene, not the people that are auditioning, have never been in improv in Orange County. I'm talking to the people that have been here a year. If somebody's moved here, if somebody came out of high school, if you have a bad reputation, you're gonna have a real problem. So I would really focus on solving things and having a good reputation is what I think, because that's been a big thing with us. That's what I had to say about that. If you want more people, then work on your reputation to be a decent people at your theater.
I was muted. Sorry. I agree. I think taking accountability for that and like making the needed changes to as a leader is like a huge part of it. Not necessarily because there might be times when you can tell your organization like, hey, if you have an issue, come and you can talk to us. But still, there's a power dynamic going on that people may not want to tell you those things. So I think even like Rod, your idea of having like an elected HR member within the group to be able to advocate for the players to the leadership group is a huge step forward. I think something that we've tried to do immediately that we've already seen like returns on is having an anonymous place for people to submit any issues that they may have. It takes the pressure off of someone saying that like, oh, well, if I speak out, am I going to have, there going to be, retributions against, me talking about one person or this incident that went down that I'm not comfortable talking with, and a certain anonymity. Danny, I see your hand, so we'll go to you next. Like allowing them even, you want to like, I think something that I've tried to do is like try to be like, we want to hear from you and your voices to hold us accountable for this. But if you don't want to put yourself out there, there's also there's also an option, that you will be protected too. I want to go to Dani, and then we haven't heard from Mikey, so I want to go to Mikey and just get some perspective on this. So let's start with Dani.
Thank you. Actually, my anecdote directly relates to the anonymous comment type of thing. So visibility is very important, but also, like for me, I'm Hispanic but white passing, but obviously, I have a very visual birth defect, and it's 1 in 100,000 people that have this genetic disorder. So I'm not going to have people who look like me, and I have to accept that. That's my own personal journey. But I think there are there's ways to make everybody feel safe. And for me, I think anybody who has any kind of difference or any kind of marginalized group, when you enter into a new environment, there's like a ticking time bomb in your head of like, okay, when is this going to be a problem? When am I going to encounter this issue? When am I going to be made to feel uncomfortable about this? And for me, I did have an instance in Spectacles where somebody was making fun of me for my birth defect behind my back. And I reported it anonymously because the people who were brave enough to tell me about it told me, don't do it. Like, don't tell anybody that I told you this, because I don't want it to be like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. So I reported it anonymously, and then nothing really happened. I didn't see any kind of, the person was still able to be in the community just as much. They were able to produce shows. And it really made me feel very unsafe and really uncomfortable until that person kind of took themselves out of the community. And it made me, I quit different shows that this person was involved with. I quit a team that this person was involved with. And, it makes you feel not great. So I think that to make everybody feel safe, there needs to be an example from the leadership that, your reports will be taken seriously and it will be addressed. And part of that is, when you have a community, everybody knows each other and there are certain people who are friends. So if you have a designated HR type person and the report involves somebody that, is a friend, then that does become a conflict of interest. So you need to have the ability to redirect it to different people who are maybe less involved and have an objective standpoint, to where it's not just, okay, well, these people are friends, so this person's not going to get in trouble. And it's the same thing I've heard of people, they're reporting about sexual harassment, and this person gets to stay until there's a certain amount of reports against them, but then they get to move to a different community and exist there because it never came out publicly. So I think that there needs to be a very public support for people who do come out and do speak out, and that all of the concerns are taken seriously.
I completely agree. Thank you for bringing up that point. I have, it's hard to, it's difficult to overcome the conflict of interest thing sometimes, because you're always just a big, sometimes you become a family, and that's so typical in a theater type industry where you do become a family. But I think, having someone who has maybe an outside perspective, doesn't have, invested interests, or has developed a relationship with an offender or something like that is an important kind of thing to do. Thank you for that, and for being comfortable enough to share your experiences. I really appreciate that. There's a couple people we haven't heard from yet, so I definitely want to hear from people. So let's go. Can we go to Mikey? If there's any subjects that we sort of touched on that you maybe want to expand a little bit on, talk about.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm part of a couple of demographics when it comes to Orange County Improv, and that's the Latinx community and the LGBTQ plus community. And when I first started with Spectacles, that's the team that I was a part of for all these years. There wasn't a lot of representation of both, as far as like when I first started watching it, and it, I'm a person who's able to just kind of watch a comedy show and just be able to enjoy myself. But I know like part of me was like itching for that representation more, to be brought more to the to the shows. And like I'll say this right now, like when I first started, I was not uncomfortable. I had friends that were part of it, and so like being who I was, am, I was able to just be okay with just being a part of this community, but trying to just fit in to learning the craft more. And this is my first attempt at improv in general, not just, I've been a part of theater many years. So as far as like being the representation, I feel like we could have a little bit more of that within these communities, these improv groups, these different and I'm a little bit blind when it comes to that type of stuff too. When it comes to Orange County in general, I'm not from Orange County. I'm from LA. So I would definitely make the drive to Orange County every day just to be a part of these shows. So when I live in LA, there's a diverse community all around me. I live in a predominantly Asian community currently. When I grew up in a predominantly Black and Latinx community. So like, and that was like what I went to school with. So growing up, that was the norm for me. Coming to Orange County, like there wasn't that representation for me all that much, and even like I'm hoping like there could be more of a representation, when it comes to that. One of the things that when I ever look for a job or like an organization to work for, one of the things I always look for is equal opportunity. It could be the greatest job in the world. Like it could be like the best paying job in the world, but if they're not equal opportunity, I will not join it. And that's something I think we should be able to show forth when it comes to these organizations with improv. And I think that's something that I would feel a little bit more comfortable with, I'm glad I got to experience what I experienced in Orange County, because, a lot of the people that I've come across that I'm still friends with are loving and amazing people, and they're allies, and they're willing to learn, and I love them for that. And I'm also in that position too. I'm Latinx, I'm LGBTQ+, but there's a lot of things that I also want to learn about different cultures, and even my culture as well. I just hope that we're all on that same page where we can just be able to learn from one another when it comes to that. I went on a whole new rant, and I apologize, but thank you for letting me just kind of speak on that.
Don't ever apologize. No, of course not. It was great to hear from you, and you brought up like so many like really great points. I just want to let's kind of keep going. I don't want to like have to like interject every single time someone is done speaking or wants to talk. If somebody is there's a conversation that's going on in the chat right now that is definitely, even like Rod, you brought up something that that worried me a little bit, that we talked about, that like yes, we look at like demographically, we look at Orange County, and then but we want to be like, I think, like the lack of diversity in certain parts of Orange County, but I think even there is, like Fernando brought it up, if you go to Santa Ana, Anaheim, Garden Grove, Westminster, there are so many BIPOC people from all over that those areas, and it's and like, yeah, Danny, again, 40% Latinx population in Orange County. That's a huge part of the population that has, you know, not a lot of representation on stage in the theater community, whether that's the theater community or whether it's the improv community. But yeah, like I even had like hesitation. I was a little bit worried, and like a couple people reached out to me about like, well, even now we're seeing, you know, a lot of people who are community leaders in this organization or in this county that are, you know, are white people. And I was worried about having this conversation of like, okay, well, are we just, you know, are we going to listen to like white people talk about how we should be diverse? And I think we've managed to do a good job of steering away from that. But I think there is an opportunity that we're missing in reaching out to this diverse population of people in Orange County. I think that a lot of what's already been done and what's continued to be done is catered to an audience that improv has always kind of catered to. And we, you know, can kind of begin to like alter things, and it start, for me, in my perspective, it starts with, you know, leadership, giving like, in my opinion, if I put in, you know, make sure that leadership is diverse, that's going to make changes already happen to make the group itself diverse, because people might feel comfortable by seeing themselves represented in the leadership positions. If I keep my groups diverse, hopefully my audience begin to like get more and more diverse because they see representation there happening. If educators, people who are teaching improv, are diverse, then there's going to be like I don't know, I feel safer when I study under learn comedy from someone who is a person of color. Yeah, I think there's so many things to talk about here. Does anybody have a point that they would like to bring up? I see Rob. Let's go to Rob
go to Devin. Yeah. You go to Devin.
Devin, and then Phil, and then Rob.
Okay. Either way, yeah. Like one of the things, and I know I'm a white guy who is in Orange County. I'm not originally from Orange County, but so one of the things, my wife is Filipino, and she's actually co-owner of Improv City, and I'm so, you know, and it's nice because I feel like her representation as the owner, I think, has also made people who are minorities feeling more comfortable being part of Improv City. I can only speak from that. Again, we perform in Irvine, which is when you think of white, Irvine is the first city that comes to mind. And one of the things that I personally have found that has been helping to get that diversity to come through is, and I think a lot of it I give her credit for, because I think, first of all, I know we had a large Asian group come and join Improv City, be part of it, and just from word of mouth and knowing that we work to make everyone comfortable. One of the things I say day one when someone becomes part of Improv City, and I've always stood by this, and it can seem a little harsh, but I mean this from a perspective of like, you guys all know, when someone joins your improv group, they're family. They are your family. And that's what it's about, and that's what makes improv so tight is family. And I always tell people, when you're not part of, you know, our Improv City, I don't care if I don't care what your race is. I don't care, you know, I don't care what color you are, what religion you are. I don't care what sexuality you are. I don't care how old you are, how young you are. All that matters is you're part of this family now. And I sincerely tell people, like, you will be part of this, and I will always have your back on anything that you need to do, whether it's if there's ever a personal attack from another performer, from someone in the audience, whatever, I will be there to have your back. And that's one of the things that I don't stand for, is any kind of thing. And I feel like, and I've told people straight out, like, if you have a problem with anyone, we're all just human beings, just be kind to each other, because that's what it's about. Then there's the door. I literally, if you can't abide by that, then just go out the door. And I've one of the things I found, and is we have like so many different people part of Improv. We have a trans performer, we have people of color, we have gay, lesbian, old, young, every possible thing you can think of, and I'm proud of it. And I never set out to have that happen. It just happened. And I found through what makes it happen is the safety and the comfortable that they feel with the improv troupe, and is that they also put out the word, say, hey, I feel safe here, and then it spreads through there. And I feel that's the thing that I think we could all do too, is we have to go out of our way to make everyone feel safe. I think we're all in agreement on that, obviously. And again, I just feel like if we can't make everyone feel like it doesn't matter who you are, what you believe, it doesn't matter. We're all just people, and we're all just trying to make people laugh, and we come through those doors, we go on that stage, we're all in it together. And that's what improv is about, is yes-anding and being there. You're on stage in front of a group of people with nothing but each other. You have no idea what your suggestion is going to be, no idea what's going to happen. You have to have each other. And I find that perspective cuts through everything and brings through them feeling, making everyone feel safe. And I feel like if we can continue that perspective and teaching that perspective, just be kind, be there for everyone. And that's kind of been my philosophy. And I'm rambling. I have a tendency to do that, and I apologize. But I just feel like through them, through everybody feeling safe, and especially, the minority, the BIPOC, everyone, just then it will just continue to grow and grow in the positive way in which we want. I hope that makes sense. I'm not too clear all the time on the way I talk, but I say that with a deep heart, and I mean, I really am so happy that we're having this conversation today, because it's something that absolutely needs to be done, not just locally, globally. So thanks, Tony, for putting it together.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah, like I know we're running low on time. We've got like 40 minutes left before this meeting is scheduled too, and I want to make sure that I hear from a lot of other people. So who we have more? Are there points people want to make? I know I saw Phil's hand. Rob had a point he wanted to make. Tony had a point they wanted to make. So let's do that order. Phil, Rob, Tony.
Hey guys, I want to keep this brief. I missed the first hour of the meeting because I was actually teaching an improv class. So I mostly just have a question for the group, is that, and if this has already been covered, just let me know and I will watch the recording later. But I wanted to know basically, as an improv teacher, what our thoughts are on and I know there are lots of teachers in this thing, in this discussion, what we can do as teachers to be more inclusive and to make our classroom environment more welcoming to BIPOC students. And that was just kind of a question I wanted to throw out to the group and see if anyone had any ideas or suggestions. And like I said, if it's already been answered, then we'll move on.
That's a great question. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I do. And Fernando brought up something earlier about not being from a white background and not knowing how to interact. So like, I know that you do a lot of work with children. It's like just being aware that their home life might have been very different from your home life, and just like knowing that they're bringing something different to that meeting with, you know, an instructor than you might have been. Especially since what you're teaching them is just so freaking important. So don't fuck it up, though. But you know. But yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Rob?
I'll go about it. All right, so it's the same point that I made before, and I know I'm kind of a one-trick pony with a lot of things. And what I said before, and this is when I traveled, a lot of people like shit talk other theaters. Like a lot of people, they'll be like, this theater, they made fun of this person, or this person treated this like that, or this person has a guy that did this and no repercussions. So earlier I talked about like being reactive, and I know like other people might be better at having a plan. I'm still the biggest thing about like, you gotta nip shit in the bud, man. Not just you. I'm you, I think, but like everyone in general. A lot of times, I mean, if you've taught improv more than 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, you probably let shit slide. But now I think we know sometimes like we can't let that shit slide as much, because then that if you're teaching high school or out of high school, they kind of get, if they're new sometimes, and like if they're learning with new people, they might get like kind of pigeonholed either into their race, their gender, their one funny character that is a certain demographic or some shit like that. But I'm a big fan of when you're teaching, like early on, besides like, you know, doing the general talk about improv, it doesn't matter if you blah, 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 which we all know and do. But it's also reacting when people fuck up, because if you're teaching an intro class or anyone new, somebody's not going to understand that people have feelings different than them. And you gotta address that a little bit. And some people are good at addressing people privately, and some people are good at addressing it in front of the class to where it works. Definitely, man. I have to go back to another point. Your reputation is all that's gonna matter for like growing larger. So when anything happens as a teacher, if you don't make it safe, you're gonna stay with your same crew for 10 years, and you're not gonna have new friends. Definitely being reactive as a teacher. And it's tough, man. I know I bring up Rod all the time, but we talk about some things like this, is like, for sure, we've both made mistakes throughout the years as a teacher, where now we're like, I probably shouldn't have let that slide. Probably could have handled that differently. And I know a lot of you guys teach as well. It's just, he's a personal friend of mine where someone I can talk to, and I know that this happens to us. So it's just, I mean, teaching is a skill set in its own, just learning how to address it. I think, in my personal opinion, that's one of the biggest things outside of like, I think we all understand the talk, and maybe some of us talk better about like your race doesn't matter on stage and whatnot and so on, but react appropriately.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a big part of it, is that like as an educator, if something happens, you got to take the moment to educate, you know, and like you've got to be proactive about like, okay, you know, like you've got to be able to own up to issues that are happening, because, you know, someone might have come from a place where whatever they're saying might be completely appropriate. And I think like you have to take that moment to be like, explain why it wasn't, explain why, you know, words like that have consequences to them in a place where we are cultivating the freedom to say anything. There's unlimited possibilities on stage and in the rehearsal and then in the classroom, to really kind of be like, understand that words have consequences, and use those moments to teach, use those moments to be an educator, to make a point. A really great thing that has been brought up several times within my time at Cal Arts is that I've used a lot as an improv teacher, is a process of critical response. Let me bring up exactly who it's by so that you can see it. It's free online. Liz Lerman, the critical response process resources, is where you really kind of don't necessarily like respond to someone in a way that's like, you know, like reprimands or like harsh notes, since we're dealing with art here, but it's things that you took from it, like asking them like this. These are some things that these are things that I felt. I got visions of this. I felt this when you said that. Is that what you may have intended? And it might not even be what that person is intended because of the way that they were raised. And so like really allowing them different perspectives, I think, when opportunities arise for you to do that is one way to go about it. Okay, I wanna we had a couple other people. Let's see. It was Phil, then it was Rob, then it was Tony. Yeah. So go ahead, Tony.
All right. Yeah. So this is kind of a general question. We were talking about being welcoming to new people. I was wondering, are we cognizant of our instructors being welcoming versus being patronizing? Because sometimes when I go to new theaters, I tend to play more modestly because oftentimes those events are billed as introductory events, so I don't want to intimidate new people. But sometimes there are some instructors who say, oh, I can tell you've done improv a little bit. I've done it 9 years. In my head, I think, excuse me? What do you mean by a little bit? But I don't believe it's because of my race, but I was just wondering, is that something that directors tend to think about when training their staff?
Huh?
On the people.
Yeah, Rob.
I've never talked about it with it. To be honest, I've never been like, don't be. I mean, if you're wondering if we train them, I don't think I have. I don't know about anyone else.
I've always been of the perspective, like, I don't care how long anyone's been doing improv, whether it's your first day or your 5,000th show. It's you and that other person on stage together creating a moment of magic. So it shouldn't have to matter how long you've been doing it, how short you've been doing it. It's the connection between you and the other person, and that's what matters. This is my opinion.
I know for me as a teacher, if that was the question, I do like to know sometimes if the people in my classes have had training or not, because that I try to shape the level of my notes to that. And so I might ask that question like, oh, you seem like you've had training before. And I don't know that I've ever meant that to be in a patronizing way, so much as asking like, hey, you know what you're doing. I can give you higher level notes rather than introductory notes. So for me as a teacher, when I'm giving notes, that's why I might ask a question like that.
Yeah, I guess for me, the thing that bothered me with that incident, that person, I'm not going to name names, that person specifically said, the wording was, I can tell you've done it a little bit.
I also think that one of the things I always tell people is, like, the first time you step on anytime you step on stage as an improviser, it's your first time stepping on stage because it's new every single time. I always like to say improvisers are professional amateurs because in a way we are, because every single time it's something new. Sure, the short form game or the long form scene or the format that we're doing is the same, but the result is going to be different every time. So we're really all new, and I think we learn something new every time. Every time you step on stage, you take something away that you didn't learn before. You may not realize it, but you do. So again, like I said, I've been doing improv for 25 years, and I love still just catching. I learned that right now, and that's one of my favorite moments in improv is being on stage and learning something that I hadn't done or thought of before. And sometimes, not being a new improviser, I'm sad that I don't have as many opportunities, I feel, to learn all those ones, but you still learn every single time, I feel.
Yeah, I think, Tony, the point you're making, like, really is that, like, whether, if you're in a leadership or whether you're in a teacher in a position of power, the words you use matter, and they have, like, consequences. Yeah. So it's something to really, really consider whether you're teaching improv, whether you're leading an improv group, whatever. If you're in a position of power, those words matter and can have effects on the people that you're training, the people that you give notes to. I do want to, I'd like to hear, let's see here. I'm sorry, let me go back to my notes. I would like to definitely we've talked about so many different points, but I would like to kind of open it up in this last half hour we have left here in hearing testimonials from people, from people from diverse groups about previous experiences or issues in the community. And we've already heard some so far. Some have even appeared in the chat. Just to raise concerns about maybe something that we haven't touched on yet, or we haven't, that hasn't been addressed. I'd like to, err on the side of the focus, because since the focus of this meeting is for, raising and protecting BIPOC voices within our community, but I don't think necessarily that we're limited to that. But I think, yeah, does anybody have, I see Rod. We haven't heard from Fernando for a while, so I want to go to Fernando, and then we'll go to Rod, and then we'll go to a couple of different people.
Yeah, if I'm gonna be honest with you, you just need BIPOC leaders, but not just like leaders. You need like showrunners, you need teachers, you need directors, you need producers. And no offense to any of the white people in here, I love most of you, I love all of you, but like it's just something you're not gonna get. It's something you're not gonna understand. And I had a talk earlier today with David Escobedo, and I've had other allies in the community who they give me a small thing, but for them it's like they're giving me the world. And then their attitude is like, well, I give you the small thing, therefore you should be grateful forever and kind of shut up and know your place. And not that they say it that way, but it's implied, it's directed. Not anyone in this room, so not any of you. Some of you have been amazing allies. Like Matt Thomas, he's here. He's been an amazing ally to me. I have to give him props. He's been a great ally to me. So Matt, thank you for everything. I'm just saying, like, there's sometimes they don't get it. It's like, oh, we did a diverse thing. All right, game over. Let's go home. Mission accomplished. So like, I definitely feel like you need BIPOC teachers, directors, producers, showrunners, mentors, community leaders, all that stuff. Like, if you truly want to be diverse, you have to have that, because if you're gonna recruit people, if you're gonna like make them feel welcome, they have to see themselves represented in the leadership of your company or in your house teams or whatever. Especially in Orange County. I'm part of the LA community now. LA, people swallow a lot of shit in LA because they're ambitious and they want to make it big on something. So they'll swallow some extreme abuses, some stuff that'll make you cry. In Orange County, people will be like, I just want to do it for fun. I don't want to necessarily have microaggressions all the time. So like, if you do want to change, I feel like you would need just BIPC leaders to show people in the community that they're represented. That's probably the biggest thing I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's go to Rod.
Before we move on to something different, I just wanted to comment on Fernando's point. Because Fernando, I know you've been a part of watching and being a part of what's been happening with Second City and stuff too, where that's been a big issue. And I definitely agree with you. I guess what I'm saying is to make those types of changes, do we need to, should our focus start at the top and work its way down? Or do we start at the bottom and encourage, bring more people, I don't know what I'm saying, like encouraging more BIPOC voices into the community that can then become those leaders, or I don't know what I'm saying. But I'm sorry.
In my opinion, and this is again just my opinion, I would respond to as both. Doing both is proactively doing something, because I think that there are like, it's you could say, well, should I do it this way or should I do it this way? I think it's about doing it all around, all throughout every interweaving part of our organizations, not just like, oh, well, let's make this a focus, let's make this a focus, let's make this a focus, making a cultural change. Holly, and then after Holly, we're going to go to Rod, because I remember that was happening.
Hi, so one of the thoughts that I keep having coming through is we were talking about root causes earlier and talking about things, and I was thinking about if it starts from the audition process, how do we feed the auditions, right? Where do the feeders come for those auditions? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, there's two real spots where the feeders come from. It's our friends and family who we bring to shows, and it's the general audience that looks on stage and goes, I can do that, and then they go out to the auditions, right? Those are the people that come into auditions at the first. And Rod said it earlier, like and I know you're not making it as an excuse, Rod, but you're just saying like, well, people don't come to auditions. So I would like to take a second to step back and think about, well, why aren't they coming to the auditions? And I think the reason is that we're not, as a group, doing a good enough job of opening auditions to people, or potentially even something as simple as advertising shows as a welcoming place for audience members who are potentially BIPOC, like, or even LGBTQ. Because I feel like if there is a feeder, a pipeline of people that are BIPOC or LGBTQ that are coming to shows, seeing that what we do is attainable and then they can then do it, they would come to the auditions. If we just kind of slap up a Facebook profile post and go, all right, we'll come next week. Or if we're like, dang, we're having auditions next week, come to my thing, and we're a white person and we're telling all white people, then yeah, that's who's going to show up to your audition. Because you're not trying to go out and go, this is something that's accessible for everybody. Please come to our thing, you know? So the root cause starts, and the audience is the great X factor, right? We have no control over who comes to the shows. We have no control whoever is there. But what we can do is we can let people know through any means possible that we are there and we are here. And this is something that if you really like, you too could do this. Like, it's possible. And that's also where visibility comes in, because if someone comes to the show, sees someone like themselves on stage doing it, realize that they can do it and that someone like them is doing it, they're going to come do it, you know? I have seen a total of one trans person perform improv in my time. And that's sad, because, I mean, I would love to see more representation for trans people, and that's a conversation for another topic, another time. But like, if I'm a trans person, I mean, just putting it out there, if I'm a trans person and I'm going to a show and seeing another trans person on stage and knowing I can do what they do, I'm going to go and audition for that group, you know? And I don't know if I can necessarily prescribe that to the BIPOC, but I would assume it would be somewhat close to that, you know, it would be there. So I think it starts with bringing the audience in and showing them that it's accessible. I think that's a good start.
I think so too. And I think also like creating different opportunities where there have not previously been opportunities too. Like creating different initiatives to say, okay, hey, we're going to make a concerted effort to make sure that we offer up something like classes that are properly represented to students who may have never had access to those things in the first place. That's, I think, a big way of reaching out to the community, doing, you know, I know a lot of our companies, like, you know, sometimes we don't necessarily thrive. Nobody gets into improv for the money of it. But using our shows, using our classes or whatever sort of efforts that we have to raise funds for other communities and reaching out to them. That's it. I think in my perspective, those are things that I'm trying to do actively. Yeah, I think that's another way that you can continue to kind of build and cultivate this more diverse group. Let's go to Rod next.
I was just going to ask a question, and we're already doing it, which I was going to ask if after testimonials, if there would be space for people to give suggestions to those of us in leadership of more actionable items. Because I've loved this whole conversation, but I think a lot of this is very philosophical. And in these last couple of comments, it's been very specific, and I love it. So I would love if people have suggestions. I was going to ask Tony if there would be room for that after
yes,
things that they want to see from us.
Absolutely. And I think if we do run out of time, I mean, we can go like a little bit over, but if we do run out of time, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure to give every leader of an organization to give an option to reach out, saying like, here's an email or here's a place where you can contact us, makes it so that we can make the needed changes that we do, because it's tough to like do it. Like one organization might be completely different from another organization. So to tailor those responses. And again, this is a great opportunity, I think, to, once we have the recording of this, to share this video with your organization so that they see, okay, I have a place where I can go to make, you know, suggestions and make changes that are happening. But I saw hands. I saw, I think, let's continue. Yeah, I saw Joey, and then let's go to Lauren, and then I want to hear a couple more like things that people have experienced. Joey.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback off of, and this was something that I wanted to add a little bit earlier, because I wanted to address exactly that, which was like the actionable things that we could do. And something that we touched on earlier that is a thing that Tony has done with Fancy Hobo, who I'm here with. Something that Tony did as like in a leadership position, which is something that is like a real action that we can take, that we touched on earlier, was making that statement for the audience. That's like, if you are going to be an audience member, like this is what is expected of you. And there was something that Holly mentioned earlier, where she was like, when I come on stage, I don't have to feel like, I don't want to feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle. And I think an actionable thing that we could do is exactly that. And that would kind of make that uphill battle less, if they could know that there was an actionable thing that said, like, I mean, this is obviously, it shouldn't be phrased this way, but like, don't be a fucking asshole, you know? If there was like an actual thing that was like an audience code of conduct type of thing, even if it was just included in like at like a pre-show spiel or something on your website, I think that could be an actionable thing that could make that uphill climb a little less.
Yep, I agree. Lauren.
Speaking on with harassment feelings, Danny kind of made me think about it. Some of where I've experienced a lack of trust in anonymous harassment, like letting it be known and then it coming back to bite me in the butt, or not feeling comfortable within the Orange County community. So myself not feeling comfortable actually going to other places or people because of what I have felt or experienced. So as a result, feeling fiercely protective over people I work with or in my classes, wanting people to feel very safe, and recognizing I'm probably making mistakes in that, or even maybe overdoing it. From curiosity of wanting to help people who've had those feelings in ways that I can't even relate to, how to help people who have stopped feeling safe in the community or where they are, if there are any suggestions on that. Who, like for me, where I haven't trusted anonymous systems or people, or maybe peers even, who might be HR. Is there a way to outreach to people that we know of, or just in general, or just suggestions that I can't even think of to recreate safety that might have been lost?
I think that there are opportunities with leadership or privileges that come with leadership that we have to really be proactive about. Again, from my perspective, just because from my experiences, I have experienced both, you know, being a leader of an organization and also being a performer of multiple other organizations. And there have been times where I have felt like I couldn't reach out to anybody. An example of that would be, you know, I was performing at a space, and it had nothing to do with any of the improvisers in the space even. I was there, and I happened to know someone who was directing a show out of a theater, because it is also like operates as a community theater too. And a director of one of those shows who I know was having conversations with me, and at one point called me like a racial slur to my face in the back, about like a half hour before I was supposed to perform a show. And to have someone in a position of power, like outside, of even the organization, the establishment that the organization is even renting out, was like, it was difficult of like, who do I go to approach this? You know, do I go to approach like the organization that I'm working with? Do I go to approach the theater itself? And there were lots of times. So I think if we can, something that I've committed to, and it's something that I want, that I believe in, really, is like not only just being proactive about protecting people, and expressing that to my team, expressing that to my coaches, to my teachers and things like that, but also expressing it out to places that we work out of, expressing it to the theater that I rent out of, and being like, hey, we want to uphold these standards. Are you going to uphold these standards too? Let's engage in a dialogue about how you can uphold these standards. And then I think, like, from my perspective, is I want to influence the community outside of my community, and to make sure that that institution, because if that institution implements issues like that, then other institutions could follow in their lead. So it really comes down, in my opinion, to like leadership and being proactive about protection, because you know, there are different power structures in place that create issues that people can't really overcome sometimes. Are there, before we get to, are there more things, maybe experiences that we haven't heard from, that maybe people have had that they'd like to share, discuss, things like that? I think it's, yeah, Rob.
I'll just talk 10 more seconds. It's okay to be the bad guy. I think a lot of us know too, if you're in leadership. I've only had to throw out one audience member in 1,000 shows. We've only had to throw out one. It's okay to be that person. That person was racist. It's okay. I think a lot of people, you don't want to toss an audience member, fuck it. You'll get more. You perform, people are going to show up. They always do. So, you know, be a leader. Being a leader sucks sometimes. Just suck it up. And like, if someone sucks and they're in the audience, that person in the audience sucking affects so many people. And it's okay. It's $5, $10, whatever you charge for your show. It's nothing. So yeah, just do it. That's my big advice.
Yeah. And yeah, Holly.
I just wanted to add something too. This actually, so one thing to talk on is the hosts of the show. If you have a hosted show, being really, I know that we're not supposed to like disregard any suggestion, but there are some newer hosts that will go to the bat of like, I'm taking whatever you say the audience says. And sometimes the audience says some downright terrible stuff. And the host is afraid of saying, no, don't say that. You know what I mean? Because they're afraid that like, oh, I should be taking all suggestions. And I think it should be imparted to anyone that's hosting that it's absolutely okay if the suggestion is not appropriate in any manner to say, no, that's not appropriate, and just say it to the audience's face, because that will go a long way with instructing the audience that that's not okay. And if someone gets mad and bounces, like Rob said, like, they bounce. That's on them, you know, but we're cultivating the culture of acceptance and a safe space. And it has to start from like people that are talking. Also, there was someone said a while ago that like in their theater, it doesn't matter what their sexuality or their race is. I want to challenge that a little bit to say that it does matter, because if you say that it's not important what your race is, you're really erasing that person's contribution to the form. Or their sexuality. Like, everybody has a thing that they bring to the table with improv and performance in general. And so instead of saying, I don't care what you are, you're blanket, what we really should be saying is, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm going to let you bring your experiences to the form. I think that will help us all grow as people. And that's inclusive of sexuality, inclusive of gender, inclusive of race. It's like, you bring something, you're special, you bring something to the table, you matter. Thank you for bringing that. I'm going to help you with that. So. That's all I got. I'm gonna mute myself.
I just to build off of that, that's so important. There's like a lot of times where there's like erasure of and like Fernando, you touched on this topic too when you were having that conversation that I tuned into earlier. It's like erasure of someone's culture. There is or someone's like perspectives too, and like we want to like be welcoming, I think, and be like, you are such your own unique person that like that's what we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate your uniqueness, your creativity, your talents in our organizations and things like that. And to build off of what you had previously said, even about like hosting and saying that the things that we do on stage do matter. They do matter, because even if we're performing in front of a small group of people, if an audience member says something and we get away with it, or if a performer says something problematic and we get away with it, we're setting up the standard that whatever that was, however like problematic as it was, is okay to do. And I think addressing it is absolutely important. There's a big kind of a discussion that my team had about this recently, about like, well, what are the narratives that we perform on stage? What are, like, are we going to be adding to problematic stereotypical narratives when we create characters on stage? Or are we going to challenge ourselves to do something bigger, to create more meaningful and skillful comedic art, rather than like pushing away and shying away from stereotypes, from narratives that are rooted in oppressive cultures? We want to create joy, not propel this narrative on stage. Matt.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank everyone for talking about a lot of this stuff. It's really great, and I feel like I've learned a lot. The second thing is I'm no longer currently in a leadership position, but if you or people you know who are BIPOC are interested in being leaders, like I would just want you to know you can always contact me. Having been part of leadership for so many years, like if you need advice or anything, I would be glad to help and help you get that, because I think the more leaders we have, the better off we are. Anything I do to help with that would be great. The third thing I just want to say really quick, and I kind of wanted to amplify what Tony said earlier about the media. And a little bit about how we've been talking about nipping things in the bud, especially in like a class environment or an audition. But like as an improv teacher, I feel like one of the things I have to break from students is like they'll go into a scene and they'll create like this conflict out of nowhere that feels like it's coming straight out of a sitcom, like we're jumping right to the second act of a sitcom, because that's what they've seen, that's what they know. And I think that's also true when it comes to like there's so much white-centric media that people are going to jump to that. That's what they know. And if you're in a class and someone comes in and they makes a really a weird move that doesn't fit in improv, you would correct them immediately. But for some reason, if it's like offensive or something, I feel like a lot of times teachers will just kind of go like, and not interrupt it and not correct that. They'll just kind of like, and how unhelpful that is. If you want to actually make change, you should do the same thing as you would if you were giving them an improv note. So yeah, I just wanted to, because I thought about that when Tony was talking about the media, of just like how it's sometimes hard to break people out of like these sitcom-y type of moves, and that's the part I see as a straight white guy. But that also is going to apply to the fact that people are going to jump to these sitcom-y moves that are all from like white-centric media, so I just kind of wanted to amplify his point a little bit.
Really like solid points, Matt. And like thank you for being like open and available for anybody who like needs, as someone who was and what was and continues to be a really great leader in the improv community. I think you know, anybody could learn a lot from you. I really like, I think leadership really is, and this kind of speaks to something, since the majority of us here are leaders. Leadership to me is defined by how you show up in the moment when people need you. And like, we can either, with this movement that's happening around the country, things are beginning to shift, and we're beginning to challenge things in all sorts of institutions everywhere. And we want to lead in this moment. We want to be and make the actual systemic change that so many people talk about. And that is how real change like happens. So I hope that, I know we're about to run out of time, but I hope, and this has been a really great conversation. I hope that today that I think we've taken a really great job. We've done a really good job of having this conversation with a lot of, like we requested at the top, a lot of great care, a lot of compassion, and there's been a lot of listening going on, and there's been a lot of learning going on. Take these things, you know, critically think about them, and then it's important not to just critically think about them. It's important not to just make policy changes, but the action is the most important thing about whether or not change is going to take place. Yeah, I really want to commend everyone for doing just a really incredible job here today. I would love to encourage more conversations like this. I think not only are conversations like this good for our individual communities, and I would encourage you, you know, to go back to your own improv organization and to hold conversations like this with your individual organization, because things might get brought up there that you would have never thought of. You know, things got brought up in the conversation that I had with my organization that weren't brought up here, and things were brought up here that didn't come up in my organization. So the more we engage in these dialogues, the more we learn, the more we grow, and the more we learn how to act and different ways to move forward. I just want to go through every major organization to just sort of list different ways that people can contact you, and I'll start. So if anybody has wants to report any sort of like issues or concerns, or give suggestions on ways that the companies can change and grow and alter and make real actual progress, you can email dearfancyhobo@gmail.com, and we will get back to you. You can also like message us on any of our social media platforms, which is all just Fancy Hobo Improv. And let's just keep going around. So let's go to the collective. Rob.
Robert, at the collective. Probably message a bunch of you guys anyways, because we have a lease. We might be one of the only people here that has like an actual lease that I'm on. We have a theater that we lease, and we haven't made no money in 3 months. So y'all might get a Patreon request soon. Cause I'm running low on money. So you can Google us. You can just Google us, and my name's there somewhere. Just whatever you need. Don't do racist Asian accents. Kick out shitty people. And
Oh, good. What about, let's go to Devin, Improv City.
Anyone wants to reach out, you can message, just really simple, improvcity@improvcityonline.com is the email. It goes to Gina, it goes to me, either one. Want to reach out to either one of us, same thing, social media, Improv City, all one word. We're out there. Feel free to send a message, talk, reach out. Would love to hear from some of you. Our doors are always open, and again, just like I said before, just be kind. We're all humans. Just be kind. Love one
another. The Amazing Comedy Theater, James.
People can reach out to me directly. Facebook Messenger, probably the best way to hit me up. James Stebick. we at Amazing are kind of stuck in a holding pattern until we're able to reopen again, but I have a ton of show opportunities. I would love to get directors of color, BIPOC people involved in putting up shows at Amazing. If anyone here has any shows they'd like to pitch, shows they'd like to bring to life once we're able to do live shows again, please feel free to hit me up. I want to be as inclusive as possible. I want to open the doors of Amazing to everybody. And yeah, thank you again for organizing this, Tony. This has been really good.
Thanks for being here. Rod, Best Coast.
Hey y'all, yeah, I mean, we're on social media if you want to do that, or you can email us at bestcoastimprov@gmail.com. If you want to talk to me directly for any reason, you can find me at rodbagheri@gmail.com, or you can Facebook message me or whatever strikes your fancy. Thanks, y'all. This has been really, really helpful in trying to enact change that I think has been needed for a long time, especially for me. I'm very, very culpable for a lot of this. Thank you, Tony, for putting this together.
Thanks for being here. Lauren, Modjeska Playhouse.
I'll go ahead and put it in the chat to make it easier to remember. You can reach me directly. It's probably the best way. We're small. We also have a physical space that we pay money on each month. That might not make it. So we'll see, but we've had a lot of ideas and programs we want to do, and I want to be able to add more voices and BIPOC voices to that. So please reach out to me. We do improvised plays and have a very theatrical approach to what we do, and it's all audition based for the most part, and even just what we're trying to offer with our class programs. So I would love to have a conversation and do something about that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tony. Everybody's been excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, I don't know if Matt, is Spec still doing classes, or?
I mean, in theory, our only classes right now are drop-ins, and that is in a space that I'm not sure will survive either. Yeah, because we teamed up with a tutoring company that has a space, and those have both been closed since this whole thing. But I'll throw my for the few of you who aren't already my friends, I'll throw my Facebook in chat, because Facebook Messenger is probably the best way to get a hold of me, since the head doesn't disappear after I see a message, and I'll remember to get back to you. Otherwise, I'll forget. Yeah, if you're not already my friend, just friend me on there, and feel free to shoot me a message if you have a question about anything.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being here. This has been like a really great conversation. I've learned a lot, I think, and we had like such an amazing time today. I would hope that we can have more conversations like this on the regular. I think it strengthens our community as a whole, rather than just like individual organizations taking actions. I think we together can, take actions to make real actual change. But thank you for being here. You've all been amazing. Yeah, have a great time, and so I hope everybody stays healthy and safe. All right, y'all.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks.
Great talk, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.